Hi, everybody. I'm Mark. I'm a recovered alcoholic. How's everybody doing today? And drug addict too. Um, Thank you for having me, Steve. Summer's been keeping in contact with me, and I love it what you guys are doing over here. Um, I'd say it's amazing how it's grown since I first became aware of everything. So, that's really cool. Um, my Let me start with my sober date. It's December 18th of 2018. And that's not my first sober date. I'm here to talk about step 6 and 7 today. And with that, getting you a good basis of where I got to in that and how it all came to be and give you some history, leading up to that. A little bit about, what brought me to the rooms, a little bit about the steps for, preceding that. So, my first meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous, or actually Narcotics Anonymous, was 1996. Subsequently, AA came into the picture for me. Um, my story is kind of everybody's terminally unique, and I'm no exception to that. I currently live in South Florida, Port St. Lucie area, actually, but I'm not originally from Florida. I don't know. There's very few people who are. I'm originally from New Jersey, born and raised. I was in the military. I was in the Air Force for 12 and a half years. And I've worked till most recently, probably 9 months ago, in the behavioral health care industry. So I'm quote unquote semi-retired from that. Um, so that's kind of a little bit about background on me. I have two daughters, divorced, longtime girlfriend, the whole nine. What led up to that? What led up to all this is, my battle with substances and that phenomenon of craving and mental obsession. My first drink was 1990. Well, I was 13. I Blackberry brandy. I stole it from my father's stash downstairs. I was adopted. And as it turns out, I found my biological family later in life. My adopted dad was an alcoholic, and my biological dad was a compulsive gambler. So I definitely, have the gene, physically, and then also nature versus nurture debate is kind of interesting how that all comes to pass. Um, so brandy, I've never touched blackberry brandy since ever in my life. That was the one and done thing. I went to other drinks instead, but it's so funny. That's the first drink I had, and it's the first drink I got sick on. But I can tell you this. I can tell you about that feeling that I know you guys who go to Alcoholics Anonymous have heard numerous times. And that's that warm fuzzy feeling as it goes down and how the everything is all right thing came to pass for me. I didn't know anything about character defects. I didn't know anything about, making amends or, you know, uh, step 5 or 1. I didn't know anything about any of that. I'm 13 years old. All I knew, I lived in a house with a dry alcoholic. That I knew. I knew he was angry all the time. I knew he was irritable, restless, and discontented all the time. And I couldn't figure out why, because he wasn't drinking, but I knew what drinking did for me. And I'm thinking, like, why doesn't he drink? I couldn't add all that up, and that's what Al-Anon and codependency, and that's what, children of alcoholics, that's what all that came to pass for me. But I can tell you that I wanted it again. I went on to some other non-conference approved substances. I went on to marijuana. I went on to cocaine and eventually crack cocaine, which took me to my knees. But drinking was always, 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 always a staple. And I think a lot of that had to do with the legality of it, notwithstanding what it does to your body, the legal and societal norms. And, I went to college. I had some, I used to think that because of my childhood, that's what made me an alcoholic and a drug addict. What I learned was that, through the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, was that's not what made me a drug addict. There are people out there who have trauma, who have bad things happen to them that are not of their fault, and they do not. This was a shocker years ago. Do not become alcoholics and drug addicts. And I was just like, I blamed that for a very long time to perpetuate my destruction and my unwillingness to want to seek help. Um, thank God I know differently today. Thank God. Um, I went on to college where I went to college for 4 years and completed 7 classes. I thought that's what everybody did. I thought that's kind of like what people did in the late 80s. They went to college and they took out student loans, and somehow those student loans would disappear, and that was used for drinking and drug money. And that's what I did with it. I didn't have any oversight. I kind of like was estranged from my family. I had a grandparents that were there was a generational gap, but they were my accountability system, and they didn't really hold me accountable because they knew of things in my childhood that they figured that I deserved to break for, and I subconsciously or consciously just took that dynamic and took it for a ride. So Desert Storm happens. I've always been interested in the military, and I've always looked for outside solutions to an internal problem. So my first drug was actually sugar. Let me just backtrack a little bit back there, and my first solution outside of myself, other than girls, I didn't know it at that time, but was the United States Air Force. That was going to fix me. That was going to give me the discipline I needed. That was going to give me the structure I needed, the willingness, the perseverance, things that come up later in step work and in step 6 and 7 and stuff like that. It's so great that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the ability to connect the dots, and be able to see things much more clear. And it talks about that in the book as well. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that in Appendix 2 in the back, with the spiritual experience and the educational variety gradually over time. That was my experience, and still is, with the spiritual awakening. But my solution was the Air Force. I went in the Air Force, and that worked for a period of time. One thing that the Air Force at that time, real in the military in general, reinforced was drinking. When you're not working, you play hard. You work hard. You play hard. So, there was a lot of age appropriate things that I really confused. I confused the age appropriateness of being 22, 23, 24, 25 with the progression of my alcoholism. Now, what took me to my knees, I kind of started that out with the crack cocaine, but alcohol at that time, obviously the United States military does not like you doing cocaine. So alcohol was my thing. I got married. That was an outside solution. She was pregnant, and that was another outside solution, regardless of how that all came about. A baby was going to fix me. A wife was going to fix me. The Air Force was going to fix me. And I proceeded to obviously eventually blow all three of those things up. But, I went out all the time. I thought I was entitled. Again, back to descriptive words that come up in 6 and 7. I was entitled to do that because I looked at how my grandparents, their generation, how it was like, if you bring home the bacon, you have some liberties. It's so my perception. I like to call alcoholism, drug addiction, the disease of perception, because left unchecked, my perceptions are extremely skewed and broken. And again, back to the gradual spiritual awakening, that's still changing my perceptions as I sit here today as a 55-year-old man. So the military, I'm drinking, I'm doing what I got to do. And I always like to share I'm a fast riser and a hard faller. And the reason why I share that is because when I put my mind to something, again, back to step 6 and 7, and back to list of character defects and assets as well. I can be very, very persistent, and I'm a perfectionist. And so I went in and enlisted. Um, and some really positive things happened. I graduated basic training early. I got picked up for a commission as an officer, as a second lieutenant. Um, all the while, drinking is a major staple in my life. You know, at those ages, I could get up, I could function the next day, but my relationship, the quality of the relationships with the people that I'm supposed to care about and love the most, including at that time an estranged, wife with a daughter in another state, that like I was more worried about going home under the guise of seeing her, but really seeing my friends and going out to bars. That's really what I was concerned about. And under the guise of, well, that's what everybody my age does. Yet I'm seeing people my age that I went to college with finish college, get married, buy houses, and keep them. And I could I just that wasn't my story. But that victimization, back to 6 and 7 again with character defects, that I'm a victim, I'm entitled to get another chance to do over. I have procrastination. I'll stop tomorrow. I'll buckle down tomorrow. So here I am, getting picked up for commission, finishing my last semester in school, finished OTS, and other non-conference approved substances came into my life. Just completely by chance initially. Like I did not go out and seek them, and that was really a game changer for a downward spiral for me. That downward spiral came in the form of eventually homelessness and federal prison. Um, I remember watching a movie, for those of you who are a little on the older side. 1992, there's a movie, New Jack City. Um, Chris Rock played Pookie, who was a strung out drug addict, and Arsenio Hall played in it as the kingpin. So I remember watching that before all this power to goods came into my life, and I remember saying, like, how could anybody get like that? I could not even fathom that. Yet that movie came out in 92. We're talking about 1996, the end of 97. That's exactly who I became. Um, and you're sitting there and you're scratching your head, and you just don't know how this could happen. You're just like, you play the tape through and you see some impactful moments, but you're like, why couldn't I stop? Why couldn't I control it? Why did I make these decisions in my life? Like, I had no idea. This is about the time that Alcoholics Anonymous pervaded my life. And, I always talk about my recovery in three stages. The first stage was the stage where I didn't know what I suffered from, and I didn't want to do anything about it. And that was the first stage after being exposed to meetings. I worked all 12 steps in 5 minutes on the wall, just to let you know. That's exactly what I did. Maybe some of you can identify with that. It just, I looked at it. I was like, why do people like have to keep coming here? Because like, I just did this in like 20 minutes, like looking at the steps. And I didn't understand this was a lifestyle, that this was a lifetime thing. Like hearing things like this is a 1 day at a time program for the rest of your life did not make any sense to me. It did not make any sense when people said that drinking is a symptom. Again, I lived it. I lived the external solution to an internal problem. I lived that, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand it. I didn't, the pain wasn't great enough, or, I mean, you would think homelessness in prison would do it, right? But the pain wasn't great enough, because I'm stubborn, that I was willing to remove prejudices and unwillingness from my life to get the steps to change. So that was my first phase of recovery, where I couldn't put together 30 days. I had a jar full of white chips and the whole nine. Um, the next stage of my recovery was, maybe some of this makes sense, and maybe I should do some of it, but I don't have to do all of it. And maybe I'll get some of the rewards that I hear these people talking about. So a big thing during that time for me was uh, substitution. And and it talks about that in the big book. It's drinking beer instead of wine, drinking on certain days, making a pledge. This is where that came into my life, where I was unable to do that, which led to prison. I was unable to separate that. And I couldn't understand why I had to stop, because stopping drinking, like, I didn't wake, I wasn't, I didn't do the things I did with the powdered goods. Like, I didn't sit there and like sell my car, rent my car, write bad checks. I didn't steal. I didn't do those things. I did steal. I learned that from going through this work. I did steal time, in the ninth step, talks about events. So I'm just saying traditionally, I did not steal money. I didn't do the things I did for the crack, right? So I wanted to take the program piecemeal. The third stage in my recovery was like, yes, I am the real alcoholic that it talks about. I'm not the moderate drinker, and I need to do all of the program. And I'm going to do all the program. And it's so funny, not funny, ironic that I did the program, but it wasn't like prison didn't do it. And I got out of prison. I was like, I got to do this. It was a spiritual bottom of looking in the mirror and not being able to look in the mirror. And if that makes sense to you, then that's a great thing. I mean, if that's your impetus for wanting to do the deal or continue to do the deal. They say when you get a little program in you can't do some of the things that you used to do with like being okay with those things. And I can tell you that, and this ties into 6 and 7, that shows in my history of recovery and my relapse. So when I got serious about this, I put together 7.5 years, and I went back to school, and as God would have it, I went back to school. I got some letters behind my name that say I know something about substance abuse. I know self-knowledge avails us nothing. I just, that's where I was directed, right? But those character defects, again, not waking up with the phenomenon of craving, not waking up, and not even having the mental obsession to do those things, but having some other areas of my life, like greed, like money, like lust, like these things are in my life, right? And my ego says, I'll never let these things get that bad that warrant me picking up a drink or doing powdered goods, right? Like I did, how does like wanting money going to lead me to a drink or a drug? How is lust going to lead me to a drink or a drug? I did not understand that connection. Um, so self-will came into the fold, and I started acting out on some of these things. And when I did that, it talks about in the big book, and I know it's an impactful line for many of us. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that some whiskey in the milk seems like a good idea. And that's exactly, although it wasn't whiskey and it wasn't milk, that metaphor was exactly what happened to me. And then once you do that, the phenomenon of craving kicks off, right? And you can't stop. And if by some chance you can, you have some programming in you and you can't get it out of your spirit. You can't, you know what I mean? Like, right? And everybody else can't know. Because, for me, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in my recovery because of what I did as an occupation. So if I went in and picked up a white chip and was transparent, I might lose my job. So we're dealing with fear, right? Another character defect. I'm dealing with fear. So I'm dealing with fear, and I'm a rock. That's saying I'm a rock caught between in a hard space here, and I can't get on it. So now I'm compartmentalizing my life. You see, I mean, it's like wow, right? It's like it's so like what I'm describing to you came out from doing step work. It didn't come out from going to see a therapist or just me sitting there one day and thinking this stuff through. Like I needed time, I needed connection with God. I needed to do the work again. So I relapsed. And when I relapsed, I lost a marriage. So, I mean, I've taken some prisoners in my journey. Um, and I went back out and I'm trying to think how long I was out for. I was out for, I remember I got divorced in treatment. I've actually divorced in treatment twice, actually, uh, not to the same woman. And, and both times I was on step three when it occurred. So it's kind of ironic how that works. But I went to treatment. I came back. I paid penalties, and and I proceeded to put another 7 years plus together, 7.5, and proceeded to do the same thing all over again. We talk about insanity, and that's what went down with me. So I have some blocks of consistent recovery where I was working a program and those character defects came in. Number one, I wasn't honest with because I'm gonna lie to myself before I lie to you. That's the reality of it because I have to sell it. And all this goes through my mind and my psyche like very quickly. So if I can lie to myself, I'm in sales now and I'm pretty convincing like that I can lie to you. But you don't pay the consequences. I do, right? Like, and so it's like self-defeating 130%. So I December 18th of 18, I went back out. Um, well, there's a little space in between there where when I came back, I couldn't put any time together. I mean, which would really scare the living daylights out of me. Like I put together 5 months, I went back out again. And here I am. I'm 55 now. And whatever age I was back then, I mean, my sober date's December 18th of 2018. I put together 14 months and I put together like a year and went back out both times. And it really scared the living daylights out of me. And a lot of that centered in, again, my identity of working in treatment and working the programming. And, you could do groups on that alone. You could have talks on that. How many people work in the field of behavioral health and they live a very sheltered life, because they can't be honest, they can't practice the principles because of fear and ego, combined. So December 18th, I gave up and I was willing to do whatever it took. It didn't matter if I had a job. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. Again, being humbled. You know what I mean? Being humbled. So I picked up that white chip and I have not had the necessary, I did not find it necessary, and I haven't lived it perfect, but to do a drink or a drug since then. And I can't tell you what tomorrow will bring, but doing things and being invited to do things like this, reinforce and kind of ensure one more day for me, give me a fighting chance. So that I think I described a lot of step one, powerlessness and unmanageability. And I didn't talk too much about step two, but I will tell you that came to believe is a process for me, still evolving. I've always had a higher power in my life that I choose to call God unequivocally. I was raised in an Italian family. Um, and it's not that same God of going to Catholic Mass and being an altar boy, and I'm not knocking the Catholic Church. But I just my conception has changed. I think for the better, and I'm going to tell you this: it's changed because of Alcoholics Anonymous for the better. I was not. I'm not a hardline guy. Like Alcoholics Anonymous was very patient with me and the men that God put in my life, and very very loving to me when I didn't feel worthy of being loved. Um, Step three, made a decision. Turn my will and my life over to the care of. I'll tell you that third step prayer. I love that prayer all day. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties. that victory over them may bear witness to those that would help of that power that love the way of life. Turning it all over to him and being of service, that's using my negative experiences and my self-will to be a testimony for others in recovery, to give them hope is such a beautiful thing. Now getting down to root causes and conditions in step 4. Um, I and the way I needed to do something different, and when I say different, I needed to take the first 2 columns in that 4th step, and I needed to write down those resentments. I know there's 4 inventories. You got the fear, you got the resentments, you got the harms, right? You got the sex, right? I thought the sex was about juicy stuff, and it was just about the pathology of my relationships. I'm a sick pup, and I saw a lot of connections in that pathology. But that first resentment one, where it's like who and why, I could get down with that. When we went down to the other 3 and 4, and what my role was in it, that middle part, where it talks about, Mr. Brown affects my. See, I needed more. The sex relations, like I could check a box, but I need this alcoholic need to go a little deeper. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because in 6 and 7, it really helped me with my pride, with my ambitions, with my security, right? It really helped me. No one should see me as. Somebody gave me an acronym. I had a sponsor, it was NOSIMA. So what does that stand for? No one should see me as, nobody should see me as a divorced man 4 times. Nobody should see me that way. Now, disclaimer about that, I am divorced 4 times. However, because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, 3 of the 4 of them will give me somewhat the time of day. That's because of the program. So one, you know what? One doesn't, but 3 of 4 do. And this is because of the power of the 9th step, the power of doing this work. But no one should see me as, I am, I am, I need, I want, ambition, security. I needed these sentence starters to really kind of define some things for me that would come out later in my character defects in my step 6 and 7, right? So moving on to step 5, I needed to talk about it with someone else. I remember my first one, I went to a Catholic church and talked to a priest. Although I had a big problem with the Catholic church, it was safe for me to do that. So I went to a Catholic priest who, I don't even think was in recovery. I just needed to, I was just told to do it because I was still living in so much fear. You know what I mean? And I've been honored to be able to listen to other men's 5th steps today, and that's a beautiful thing. So now here we are. We're at 6 and 7. It's on page 76, right? And there's only so much you can talk about 6 and 7 and directly, and that's why I kind of had to talk about this, because what I talked about defines what's going to be on what 6 and 7 is all about, right? I have had sponsors in 5 and other people in my inner circle that have revealed things to me that I could not reveal on my own. I've had people who were unbeknownst to me, like bosses in work environments, and maybe even strangers in stores and parking lots, reveal things to me about character defects that I had no idea, right? So 6, it says here, it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, and they're talking about the previous page on 5 with you're building, mortar without stone and being thorough, right? So kind of like step 2 for me with Keen to Believe, this is a process, right? I mean, I remember in the beginning of my recovery journey, if I forgot something, I thought it was like a big atrocity and I was going to drink over it. I was like, oh my God, this just came to me. And it's like 4 days later, right? And we get into steps 10 and 11, right? And if I do a thorough 4th, my 10 and 11 later is going to make it so, I have these things right on the surface and they don't burrow themselves deep. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's just funny how that awareness came, after doing in the beginning, my first round of 12 steps. But it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look back at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. So, when you look at this, when you look at this for step 6, when you look at it, It says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Let me tell you something about step 6 for me. I am not entirely ready to have him remove every single one of my character defects. I'm not going to sit here and try to and lie to you, right? Because I would be lying if I said that. I am not entirely ready. Um, if I had to put a percent to it, I'd say probably 90. But there's probably 10% that I'm comfortable with trying to manage, if that makes sense, which is crazy. But I mean, I know I have to do something about them, but I don't want to, you know, because it's just like they're comfortable. They're uncomfortably comfortable, you know. And if you can identify with that, then you're making me feel good because that means that I'm not alone. And I know I've been around Alcoholics Anonymous long enough to know that I'm not alone. So we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Entirely is a key word in that step for me. And all, right? I understand I have defects, right? But some have worked for me. I'm in sales. I'm not saying I'm dishonest. I'm not dishonest in my sales, right? However, um, my manipulation techniques, and I use those in behavioral health because I am a therapist, right? They work, right? I used to tell clients in treatment, I used to be like, I like to use my evil powers for good, and so, but I use them to destroy myself too. And so I need accountability for someone to help me learn how to manage that stuff. And that's where God help me. If I'm not ready, a prayer to be used is help me to be ready. Help me to be ready. Help me to identify and then be ready. So I can tell you that 10% is, we're in between identifying and then removing. I know I can't remove them. I know I can't. It's kind of like, you know, last night I ordered a Domino's pizza. I try to watch what I eat, right? But I ordered a Domino's pizza at like 11 o'clock. My dog is in decline. I'm struggling with it. Just a little sidebar for you. Had him. He's 13. He had a stroke, and I'm coming to terms with this, and it's devastating. And he's walking sideways and everything else, and so I'm not able to sleep. So I was like, you know what? I deserve a pizza, and I ordered a pizza, right? So where's the character fit? Am I a glutton? I don't know if I'm a glutton, but I mean, what I say is I can't control some of the things I know better not to do, right? And sometimes I need that morning connection, which helps me to get that. I mean, that prayer meditation in the morning keeps it real again, things from not festering and going to the bottom, right? So I'm able to admit some things are objectionable, right? Here we go. Can we now take them, everyone? I do believe without a doubt that if I turn things over to God 120%, that he can definitely remove them. Um, I was homeless. I've been to prison. I've had to file bankruptcy. I've been at wit's door, right? And when I have turned and it doesn't make sense, do this, and this, either spoken through sponsors or whatever, and all of a sudden I can do these things. It's totally amazing. So step 7, I love this prayer too. Step 3 and 7, my creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. That is such a powerful statement. I am now willing, you should have all of me. So being willing and all of me, like all of me, that means all of me, right? And so I struggle with things. I mean, as a guy, I mean, talking about things, being a single guy until recently, lust, women, you know what I mean? Like all of me. Like, I mean, and I get into Darwin and like, are we animals? Like, I mean, all this crazy stuff, I go into my head with, right? All of me, good and bad, right? Because there are good things that I do, and my sponsor, my men in my network have said there are good things, I know I'm focusing on a lot of liabilities here, but there are things that are good. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness. Some of this is the great part for me. One of the biggest things about 6 and 7, God uses my defects, right, to be of use to other people, even to me, just not maybe in the moment, right? So I'll give you, for instance, lust, cheat on wife, divorce. Guess what God has done? I get men who are divorced who cheat on their wives, ask me to sponsor them or work with them all the time. When I'm connected, I can use things. God uses me as an instrument for things that I've taken my own will back and have acted out on to help other men when I'm connected all the time without fair. Did men that are estranged from their children have all the time, all the time. And it's so fun. And a lot of the similar stories too. Usefulness to you, my fellows. Grant me strength as I go from here to do your bidding. Your bidding. Here we are, right? Your bidding. God, I offer myself to thee. Kind of a nice little segue into another reinforcement of the third step for me. Completed step 7, it talks about, that's that, humbly, we're entirely ready, humbly asked him. I had to become entirely ready. So, like I said, there are things that work for me that I'm not asking him to remove yet. And, that removal, asking him to remove, doesn't always happen in a formal way. It doesn't always happen in my morning meditation. Sometimes it happens like as I'm walking, as I'm working, as I'm driving. I mean, things like that. I'm like, I've had enough of that. When I did my 5th step, I got a list. When I was in treatment one time, and I'm gonna wrap it up with this, I had like 3 people who I had to do my 5th step for, right? And they all sat there with pens and paper and they all wrote down a list. And then they all gave me their list of what they heard in my 5th step. And you'd be surprised how many of those 3 pieces of paper said the same thing. So there had to be something to that. You know what I mean? It was a very powerful 5th step that gave me a lot of things to talk, to look at. A lot of things that I can't see on my own, but I can tell you this, that, because of step 6 and 7, which there's another really great book that I'm currently working with my sponsor, which I'm sure many of you have heard, Drop the Rock, which is a great book. I actually have it with my book here right now. And that really goes into some detail, expanding on the big book into 6 and 7 for those of you who are not familiar with it. I highly, suggest maybe to checking it out and seeing what you can find. But I hope I brought you a story or an experience or a journey of how I came to 6 and 7 and how I processed 6 and 7. And I want to thank you all for having me. Thank you.